New Mexico oil and gas regulators say they think their hands are tied following a ruling by the state Supreme Court that says they cannot really impose penalties on oil drillers who run afoul of the law directly. They have to go to court. We'll talk to the senior editor of Archaeology magazine. He tells us that thieves are stealing New Mexico blind when it comes to cultural artifacts out in the wildlands. They're selling them for money for meth. And the case of PRC Commissioner Jerome Block in the grand jury, we'll talk to one of the witnesses about what he testified to that grand jury about. That's right here. We're learning more about the state's investigation of the PRC commissioner from northern New Mexico. We've already reported that the Secretary of State and several of her officials have been called to testify before a grand jury in the Block question. It's apparently a grand jury convened by the state attorney general, who said all along that he's continuing to look at how Block spent public finance funds, more than $100,000 in taxpayer money. Block even admitted that he lied about some of those expenses. One of them had to do with several $1,000s he said he paid to a country band for a campaign rally outside the northern New Mexico town of Las Vegas. The band leader happened to be the county clerk at the time and eventually said his group did not play after all. We found out that the editor of the newspaper in Las Vegas is among the most recent to testify before that grand jury. David Giuliani is on the line. Can you tell us what you told the grand jury?
My testimony revolved around emails I had exchanged with the Jerome Block campaign and their constant denials and at times anger that I would even be questioning whether the infamous rally occurred and whether the band Wild Country played there. And they kept on saying, this is a ridiculous assertion that you're making, or suggesting that we're not telling the truth about this. And of course, during the testimony, I showed them the email to me from Jerome Block admitting that he wasn't forthcoming and that that the band did not play, and the money to Paul Mays was not correct. And so basically, and that was the only time to any media organization he had ever admitted this to, and he, I guess, learned his lesson and never again admitted to any other media organization that he had basically lied.
Now, Paul Mays is your county clerk, right?
He was the county clerk. He was term limited, and now it's Melanie Rivera. He is now, Paul is now the Bureau of Elections supervisor at the county clerk's office. He basically exchanged jobs with the new county clerk.
But didn't he sit down in your office and tell you that he did not play?
Well, he'd already told me. He had told me before my interview with Jerome Block that he'd come up with me. He says, I'm going to go public with this soon, but because I hadn't seen him, I had kept on calling him and he didn't return my calls. And finally, he came behind my office and he went at the door behind my office, jumped in my pickup truck, and I joked, "Is this where I'm kidnapped?" And he said he wanted to tell me the truth, that Jerome wasn't telling me the truth, and that his band never played at a rally. And he said the rally never happened. And so he told me the truth to my face. The first time I saw him, he told me the truth from moment one.
And did Jerome Block sit down with you as well?
He sat down when Paul was here, and Jerome, it was about an hour or two later, and Paul really didn't say anything. I think he kind of verbally agreed with Jerome. I guess he was still kind of afraid of Jerome. He was part of the Jerome campaign, and Jerome looked me in my eye and told me the whole story about how the rally happened, and I asked him how many people, 75 to 100 people were there. And so Jerome continued with this face-to-face, that this rally happened and that Paul's band played at this event. And Paul was there, even though he just told me that, the whole story. He pretty much sat silent, or he verbally acquiesced when I look over at him. And then later that day, he again told me, and I asked him, well, why don't you just admit to it right in front of him? He was kind of afraid of him, or they were longtime friends, and he didn't want to offend his longtime friend.
And you related all of this to the grand jury?
Yeah, all that went to the grand jury. Most of my questions from the prosecution and the grand jurors in that setting, they can ask questions. We're just seated around a table. It was very informal. I mean, it wasn't like it was a formal courtroom. We're all sitting around a table, basically.
We have no indication yet that Block has been asked to testify or has even received a letter, do we?
will he, in the grand jury setting, he doesn't have to testify. Now, he can insist on it. He can go in there, he can say his piece and testify.
Are you writing about this in your newspaper today?
You know, I was going to, but I was kind of swamped with other things, and there wasn't a lot to report. I might write as a personal call about my experience in the grand jury.
David Giuliani, many thanks.
Hey, thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Giuliani is editor of the Las Vegas, New Mexico Optic, the newspaper in that town. We'll keep following up on this breaking story of a grand jury investigation of PRC Commissioner Jerome Block.